Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube, and we are going to go full force into the 4,000 subscriber Q&A series. This is part 3, and there will be a part 4 because I did not get through the amount of questions that I've been asked in this particular segment. I can tell you that before I even finalize the segment. There's a lot of questions left, so please bear with me. First question, Sean, what mistakes do you see men make who want to be successful that impedes their ability to build wealth and live a purpose-driven life? Okay, I'm going to answer this in one and two ways. I'm going to answer it directly as your question is stated to help men. And I'm also going to answer it in general because, believe it or not, there are 5 to 10% of my viewing audience is female. So I want to answer it in both ends. The mistake that I see most people make in general is that they equate making a lot of money with building wealth. The two are not fundamentally equal. Let me explain. When I go into the dating pool, I love dating highly educated, cultured, and very attractive women. The type of women who have either bachelor's degrees or advanced master's degrees. They make a ton of money. They understand how the world works. I can carry a conversation with them about politics, about investing, about world events. And they also look awesome in a short skirt and heels. Remember, guys, I am a heterosexual male, so obviously I'm looking for that as well. Now, the problem that I see, a lot of these women make 100, 110, 120. I've dated corporate lawyers that make up to $150,000 a year working in corporate America. And what always amazes me is a lot of these women, they have no long-term investment plans. They spend everything they have on fashion, cosmetic surgery, looking their best, living in high-end, high-rise apartments in Center City, Philadelphia, and the like, to the point where they have a very low net worth on average. Now, why does this matter? Well, a lot of people associate, well, Sean, if I make 100, 120 grand per year, I'm going to be in prime position to build wealth. And I will come back to those people and I will say, guess what? That's not always true. It could be due to lifestyle creep or just keeping up with the Joneses or your own stupidity that you spend all that money on frivolous stuff and you don't form the investment capacity needed to build either wealth in the short term or the long term. So that is a major mistake that I see people make. If they make a lot of money, and by the way, guys, if you make more than $100,000 a year on average, whether it's at your corporate job or through multiple income streams, you are in the top 5% of income earners in the United States, believe it or not. So if you make that type of money, you are doing very, very well. There is no reason, if you are making that type of money, that you cannot find a way to save and invest some of that money for the long term. So that is the first mistake I see a lot of people make when we look at building wealth versus just making a lot of money. Now, you had asked this question in the direction where you're asking about men specifically. Major mistake that I see men make is that they are not able to fundamentally define what their purpose is in life. For you to be successful in life, you have to have a purpose. And I'm going to be 100% honest. Do not tell anybody your purpose. If you work a corporate job, you go to job day in and day out. You do the best job that you can. You don't talk to anybody about your purpose, your mission in life, whatever you're getting involved in. You just do it and you wait for it to explode. Meaning if you are truly doing what you are supposed to be doing on this earth, good things are going to happen. Whether it's in the antiques and collectibles trade, whether it's in finance, whether you come to me and go, Sean, I want to be a lawyer. I think I'm going to be a brilliant lawyer. Or whether you want to raise salamanders. I don't care if you want to raise salamanders. But if you raise salamanders, you raise the best damn salamanders you know how to raise and you sell them for the highest price into the secondary market so that you make a ton of money and people look at you and they go, look at that. That dude lives in a $250,000 or a $500,000 home, and he raises salamanders for 20 hours a week. How does that guy do it? Well, it's quite simple. He's following his purpose. That's what you guys need to find. That's what I set out to do on this particular channel. Another thing, and I'm going to state this with men specifically, a lot of you guys get into trouble with the women you date. Then you go to the internet and you start listening to hardcore red pill ideology, and you think that's going to solve your problem. I'm going to state this up front. Before you get involved in any type of relationship, you have to have a relationship with yourself. You have to know what your attachment style is. If you don't know what your romantic attachment style is, please take the time to Google it, read books, and learn about yourself. A lot of you guys out there, you get involved with very crazy women that are on the cluster B spectrum, either borderline, narcissistic, histrionic, or sociopathic. And then you go on the internet and you think all women are like that. So then you start to develop this mantra where all women are evil. I got news for you. That's your attachment style. When you were a young lad growing up, one of your parents abused you. You got used to that abuse. And now in the dating world, you put an energy or a vibe out there that attracts those women. They bring you into the fold. They abuse you. And then guess what? It reiterates what you think about them. So you go to the internet and you think all women are evil or all women are ultra hypergamous. Yes, it's true. Women are hypergamous in nature. I'm purple-pilled. I'm not red-pilled. I'm not blue-pilled. I will state that. But there is a limit there. Part of the responsibility lies with you. You can choose who you hook up with and also who you reject. And there's a lot of men out there, if a woman looks at least average looking in attractiveness and she wants to bang, they're going to go off with that woman and they're going to go bang and they're not going to look at the consequences. A lot of you guys make mistakes in that nature. You have to analyze the situation. You have to learn to recognize red flags. If you get into your 30s and 40s in the dating pool and you can't analyze red flags where, why is this woman who I've spoken to 2 times in the last 5 years coming on to me so strong? What does she want? If you can't analyze that that's a red flag and she's being very sexual, you're going to have some problems going forward. So you must analyze human psychology and your own attachment style. It is very important. That is my advice to you. Said another way, to quote one of my favorite red pillars out there, entrepreneurs in cars, Rich Cooper, chase excellence. Don't chase women. Let women chase you. Choose the best. That's the best advice I can give any man out there. I don't care whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, multimillionaire, or if you have a negative net worth. That advice is going to help you. Next question, now that I ran it 7 minutes on that. Great video, man. I know it's not your personal favorite, but since you are knowledgeable about this, I would love to hear you talk even more about what I perceive to be a huge bubble in sports cards market starting in 2020, particularly basketball and football. Yes, the modern era sports card market is going bonkers at present time. It started under the pandemic. The vintage market for sports cards is also going bonkers. I really have no further opinion on it at this particular time. What I will tell you is, if you're getting involved in the modern era market for sports cards, be very, very careful. It is highly speculative. The stable money is in vintage cards, and even in that market, you still have to do your research over the short term and over the long term. Next question. Sean, I think this may be a stupid question, but I think it has never been mentioned before on this channel. Please, guys, if you're going to ask me a question, don't tell me up front that it's a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. There are questions that I answered before, but you guys going back watching these Q&As, understand, I take the time to answer any question that's asked, good or bad, or regardless of what I think about it. So if you're going to ask me a question, just ask the question. You don't have to tell me, Sean, I think it's a stupid question. I don't care. I'm going to answer it regardless. Going on, what's the importance of accounting in one's personal life? Well, you have to keep track of where you're going and where you've been to know if you're reaching your goals or not. Remember, guys, if you're investing in any asset class, I tell you this all the time, you have to have a written plan. I don't care if you're investing in antiques, collectibles, used condoms, comic books, stocks, bonds, all the same to me. You have to have a written plan. Keeping track of what I was doing has helped me tremendously to achieve many other goals in my life. Point taken. That's correct. However, I feel like many people dealing with collectibles do not keep track of their expenses or earnings. Given my limited knowledge of finance, I've been using a basic balance sheet until now. Is there any basic software or solution you recommend that could be useful when having multiple income sources. Yes, if you are above the point where you've already exhausted every perceivable formula in an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheets doc, get a software package. Peachtree Accounting, QuickBooks, any of those software packages will work for the long term or the short term, depending on what you're doing. But just know they're going to cost either several hundred or several $1,000s, depending on what you want that software package to do for you. So that's how I would answer that. Next question. Sean, what are your thoughts on U2's figures? For contents, U2's is a pop culture company that makes figures based on popular content creators. They've grown in popularity so much to the point that they rival Funko Pop. I don't know how true that is. I guess it's possible. What I will tell you is this is a very speculative market. I would not be investing long-term in U2s. I would never even invest short-term in that market. I'm going to be 100% honest. It sounds very, very speculative to me. And also what I know about that market, it's not something that I would look to get into. So I hope that answers your question. You go on to ask, do you think the market for U2s will suffer the same fate as Beanie Babies? Absolutely. That market's not going to last 10, 20, 30 years or more. It's completely ridiculous to think that it would. Next question. Sean, I wonder if there's something we can actually do to get a population report, census, from Wada Games, VGA, etc. Would a petition or email carpet bombing strategy work? I'm going to answer this generally. Yes, any third-party grading company should offer population reports in a census. I know a lot of the hardcore protectors of VGA, WADA, AFA, some of these other companies, they say, you know what, Sean, they've only been in existence for so many years. Well, I'm sorry. If you're going to launch a third-party grading company, you need to do it with transparency and with ethics. You gotta have population reports available to show the items and the amount of items that exist in the marketplace for that particular item and grade in general. That's very important. Consumers need transparency to make a decision, whether they're just buying for their own collections or whether they're investing into that market. Next question. Sean, any future interest in Playboys in your opinion? Absolutely not. There will always be coveted issues like the first issue that features Marilyn Monroe. But understand, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, people are not going to look fondly back at Marilyn Monroe and go, you know what? I want the first issue of Playboy because she was featured in that particular magazine. Marilyn Monroe, much like Elvis and the Beatles, have a limited shelf life overall in the antiques and collectibles trade. Be very careful if you are getting into celebrity collecting, autograph collecting, or even in some of these markets where people are paying a premium for Elvis merchandise or the Beatles merchandise or even Marilyn Monroe merchandise. Playboys are not going to be known by younger men generations to come. The company went bankrupt. So as a result, they're no longer producing the magazine. So just know that. Next question. Sean, love the channel. My question is about the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! As an investment. Magic prices for old stuff is very expensive. Pokemon has seen an insane rise this year. The kids who played with Yu-Gi-Oh! Are about 5 years behind Pokemon. Do you believe the old iconic Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards can see exponential price growth over the next 5 to 7 years? It's not as popular as Pokemon. It's definitely not as popular as Magic the Gathering, but it is number 3. So that being said, yes, there is going to be some type of rise in some of those card prices. We're already seeing it with the first edition booster boxes, with some of the cards from that particular booster box. So yes, but I would urge you to tread cautiously. I don't think it'll ever be as hot as Pokemon. It will never be as hot as Magic the Gathering. In my opinion, right now, obviously, the 2 hottest card games are Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, and Pokemon even has the edge over Magic the Gathering at present time in the year 2021. So do with that information what you will, but I will tell you, I would tread cautiously in that market. There's a lot of people that want that market to pop. So as a result, there's a lot of market manipulators and market makers operating in that market, both in the short term and in the long term. So just be careful. Bet with your head, not over it. You'll be all right. Next question. Sean, longtime viewer. Thank you. as we are getting older, my generation I'm talking about, who grew up in the 1980s and 1990s as kids, as some with a lot or little disposable income, don't you think toys and video game collectibles will continue to rise as people want to relive their childhood memories and collect stuff they missed out on? So basically what this person is asking, and I apologize if I read the question incorrectly, it's somebody who's pretty much my age, who grew up in the 80s and 90s. He wants to know, as our generation ages, won't these particular individuals still seek out toys and video games from those particular coveted eras? The answer is yes. However, in order for a collectible market to rise exponentially, you also need younger collectors coming into the fold that are collecting that particular collecting category in mass that equates or surpasses the older collectors that are starting to retire. Now, another trend that should be concerning to you, I'm 44 years of age. There are very few people past the age of 65 that are actively collecting antiques and collectibles. There's a couple of kooks out there. There's a couple of old birds that are still going after this stuff in their 70s, but they are the exception. Most collectors end up cashing out by the time they hit 70. That has been proven. So with me being 44, yes, you have several decades to go. But what market are you going after? If you look at the market for Atari, Intellivision, ColecoVision, with few exceptions, that market's already starting to plummet again after the speculative bubble that was formed in it, thanks to Wada Games, thanks to factory-sealed Atari 2600 games rising in value. I've said this before. Younger collectors are not flocking to Atari, Intellivision, ColecoVision, and the like. Younger collectors are not going to be drawn to action figures either. So you really have to think long and hard if you want to invest over those markets, over the short term or the long term, and play it accordingly. So that's what I will tell you. So you're not saying anything wrong, but I did do a video on the fallacy of the rule of 25, if you want to look it up. Harry Rinker did an excellent article on this. I actually wrote to him, and he wrote back why the rule of 25, where a lot of you guys out there who think that every collectible asset goes in 25-year predictable cycles. When the generation that grew up with that particular collectible, they want to collect it again, prices rise. That's been proven false time and time again. So be very careful if that's your mantra. I'm telling you right now, we are seeing all-time high prices being paid for video games, vintage toys, even certain comic books, certain Magic the Gathering cards, Pokemon products. If you have these items, now is a good time to sell, in my opinion, if you do not pay a significant amount for them. That's all I'm saying. Next question. Sean, I think I've heard you say that Flesh and Blood was in a bubble. No, I said it's extremely speculative and it's too new to assess the long-term collectability of that particular item. Remember, guys, it takes 30 years for a collecting category to get established or even gain traction in the collectibles trade. So right now, what's happening with Flesh and Blood, and this is the problem that I have, you have people out there that are treating Flesh and Blood, which is a 2-year-old collectible card game, like it's Magic the Gathering. So you can't compare a 2-year-old collectible card game with that of a 25 or a 30-year-old card game as to how that's operating on the market. And what really turns me off to Flesh and Blood is all these gimmicks that they're doing with Alpha Edition limited printings, Beta Edition printings, unlimited printings. Chances are they're going to come out with a reserve list too, guys. It's a gimmick, in my opinion. And that's where I really question the, how do I want to say this, the intelligence of the overall collecting community who just blindly follows the herd and says, you know what, Flesh and Blood is going to be the next big thing. Flesh and Blood has only been on the market for 2 years. Much like all the games that came before it, like Megacorp and some of these others, we don't know how it's going to plan out, guys. I don't have a crystal ball. But what I'm telling you is be very careful of some of these card games like Flesh and Blood, where some of these other YouTubers are telling you, hey, this is going to be the next big thing. I'm buying X number of booster boxes for this. Well, guess what? They're probably getting them at the wholesale rate. They're not going to eBay paying a premium to own an Alpha Edition booster box of Flesh and Blood. They're getting them at the distributor level, and they're holding them at wholesale levels. That's a different strategy altogether than a little Timmy or a Kimmy out there that clicks the buy it now on eBay and puts a $700 booster box of Flesh and Blood on their credit card. So you have to see and analyze this market properly. So I'm very cautious of flesh and blood over the short term and over the long term. And that's nothing against anybody who is operating in that market. I know there's accusations that certain people are manipulating the market. I'm not going near there in any of the videos that I do. I don't care. I'm just telling you what I see of that market as an analyst in the antiques and collectibles trade. Do with it what you will. Next question. Sean, I have a question that I really can't find a good answer for, but I assume someone must have studied this. Suppose a company mass produces 1 million of cheap but collectible items. After, say, 10 years, it can be assumed that a certain number of these items no longer exist. But is there any way to guess about what percentage that is? No, it's theoretically impossible. Attrition happens in all markets. People's houses burn down. You know, I had a person come in on this channel and attempt to argue with me. I did not respond to the comment stating that obviously factory sealed Magic the Gathering booster boxes are a better investment compared to coins and currency because people open up factory sealed Magic the Gathering booster boxes. They don't open up coins and currency. So therefore, as a result of people chronically opening up these boxes on YouTube channels and the like, the supply automatically dwindles. Well, that's a really uneducated way to analyze a speculative market compared to a long-term established market and sophisticated market like coins and currency. The two are apples and oranges. You cannot compare them in that manner. I can, by nature, if I wanted to respond to this individual, I can state how many currency and coin collections were ruined by fire, were destroyed or stolen, or are sitting in bank vaults that are never going to come to market or are buried underground. So where are we going with this? Are we going to have a pissing contest as to what market is better over the long term? And you're going to argue, well, obviously Magic the Gathering and Pokemon are better because once somebody opens up a booster box, you can't get it back to its unopened state, which is true. Well, the same thing can happen with coins and currency. Some of that stuff catches fire, it gets destroyed. Now, you can argue, well, Sean, in addition to Magic the Gathering and Pokemon boxes getting open, they also can end up burning up in a house fire and the like. You see what I mean? It's an uneducated pissing contest. I'm not going to get involved in that. So what I will tell you is there is no way to gauge the destruction of certain collectibles year after year. I will tell you, if you do invest in coins and currency, usually when a major collection is destroyed or if it's fire damaged, it does make the news. There are companies, coin grading companies. NGC has NCS, which is an actual numismatic conservation service that actually works to restore coins that were damaged or lost in fire. They try to bring them back to their original state. So that is something to keep an eye on if you are into coin collecting. Currency, it's a little bit different. Most currency collections, unfortunately, with them being made out of paper money, they are pretty much lost to fire and natural disasters as a result. But it's a great question, but there's no way to assess it, no. Next question. Sean, are Japanese games like those made by Nintendo basically ports of those games since Mario and Zelda are released in USA a month to a year after released in Japan? Okay, this question is worded horribly. What he is asking, though, and no offense to the person that asked this, what he is asking, though, is shouldn't the Japanese release of certain original Nintendo games be worth more than their US counterparts because they're the original first releases? I agree with you. Unfortunately, we've covered this in other videos. The market does not agree at present time. Again, video game collecting and collecting of mass-produced collectibles in general is very culturally based. People in the United States are flocking towards factory-sealed, WATA-graded video games. In Japan, in certain parts of Europe, they're standing there looking at us, scratching their heads, going, I can't believe that idiot just paid $50,000 for a factory-sealed copy of The Legend of Zelda that came out in the United States in 1987. Any idiot knows The Legend of Zelda was first released in Japan on the Famicom disk system in 1986. So therefore, the 1986 Famicom disk version should be worth more than the Zelda Gold first edition print that came out in the United States. I agree with that assessment. Unfortunately, the current market, because it's been manipulated, guys, so much, does not agree with that assessment. Otherwise, we would have had somebody buy up all those copies of Legend of Zelda factory-sealed Famicom disc games that came out in 1986, push them to the market than go on collecting forums and say, hey, this is the real Legend of Zelda first print. This is the one you should be paying a premium for. Well, nobody had the foresight to do that until Wada Games came around, and a lot of these high-profile collectors in the United States started sending in their collections, propping them up at auction, and now, guess what? We're in the shit show that we're in at present time, where people think a certain video game should be worth $50,000 to $100,000 simply because it's factory sealed and in near mint condition or better. In my opinion, that is insane. So I agree with what you're stating. Next question. Sean, I have noticed certain collecting markets are overcooked and have been during the pandemic, as people have nothing to do but make online purchases. Prices for rare coins and precious metals, as well as firearms, were much cheaper before the lockdowns and extended periods of limitations to brick and mortar retail stores. My question is, do you see any markets that were negatively affected by all this that usually do better during normal times when there is generally more to do and everyone is busy at their jobs, etc.? Yes, certain markets in the traditional antiques realm have been getting hammered because those markets work best through buy and selling that's done in person. For instance, certain pieces of glassware, art pottery, traditional antiques, other items that are more condition sensitive, where people who, if they're going to drop $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $100,000 on that particular item or artifact, they want to see it in person. So those markets have been affected negatively due to the pandemic that's going on, because antique shows, high-end auctions, you can't go and visit in person as a result. So that should answer your question. Yes, there is an inverse relationship there where anybody can click a button on eBay, on a collecting group, and buy a video game, buy a graded Pokemon card, buy a graded coin, buy a graded comic book with little to no repercussions. When it comes to certain items that cannot be third-party graded, a lot of people like to buy those items in person, or they at least like to go and bid on them in person at auction houses. So the pandemic has really created chaos in that market for some of those dealers and some of those auction houses. Now, to be fair, it's not as bleak as it sounds, because a lot of people have adjusted and started buying online. They just ask the auction house or the dealer in question a lot of questions before parting with their money. But those markets are affected, make no mistake. Next question. Sean, what is happening in the PlayStation 2 game market? Okay, when you guys ask a question, please ask it more specifically. If you want me to answer this question, I would have to do a full video and go into the ins and outs of the entire PlayStation 2 video game collectibles marketplace. Are we talking factory sealed games? Are we talking survival horror? Are we talking obscure games? Are we talking about games that pretty much just have a general following, meaning games like Silent Hill or Resident Evil or other popular franchises? How do you want me to answer this question? In general, the PlayStation 2 collectibles marketplace is strong. It's not as strong as vintage Nintendo, graded Super Nintendo games, Nintendo 64 games, but PlayStation 2 has come into its own due to the fact that obviously it's been 20-some years since it's been on the market. Let's be honest. When did the PlayStation 2 come out? 2000, 2001, I believe. So it's been 20 years since it first came out. So obviously the people that grew up with that particular video game system right now are looking to go back and buy some of those titles. So as a result, there is strength in that market. How much it's going to materialize over the next 10 to 20 years, I don't know at present time. Hope that answers the question. That is going to be the last question for this particular segment. So please stay tuned for part 4, which will drop in YouTube in the next coming days. Thanks for watching and have a great night, guys.